It says climate change is one of the largest divides between America's political parties. How can Christians begin to move forward with peaceful conversation? And one thing that you could learn, I think, from Nathan, even just not only from his thoroughness, but Cameron McAllister and Nathan have a podcast called Thinking Out Loud. I highly suggest listening to this. And I think one thing they do there is they look at the world through a lens of Christian hope. And you really get to hear how, I think you give a good model there to answer this question of how to talk peacefully about things. Yes, it's between two Christians, but the thing that you guys really do there is the way you're addressing some their current issues. A lot of them are quite controversial issues. Yeah. So I'm sure you get a lot of emails on both sides saying different things. But share a little bit about that.
No, I think that's a great question. And some of what I was trying to do overall in the talk, and part of the reason that I dragged Billy Graham into this is to show that deeply, I think these are theological issues, not political ones. And it's when was the last time that your family really got into a fight over Thanksgiving dinner over a theological issue? It's politics. This is the thing that divides us. And so part of what I'm trying to do is saying, okay, yeah, the political thing is interesting, but really this is below this. And it's not trying to be subversive or anything like that and try to get around and backdoor advocate for some type of political position. I actually think that this is a posture of our heart, and it's a theological thing, and it matters to God. And so I take the conversation to that level to have it. And then the other thing that I do is sometimes for the sake of conversation is I push totally into the numbers and say, let's say everything that you believe is completely true. So I went through and calculated up carbon emissions from the electricity that my house produces, how many tanks of gas I bought, the whole 9 yards, calculated out how many tons of carbon dioxide are absorbed per acre of tree. And when I look at our family, we actually run carbon negative based off of the number of trees. So, okay, so does that mean I get to do whatever I want? So some of it is you take it to a theological thing, and then some of it is you take it down to the core of, like, let's assume the numbers are true, and then talk about what change would you actually make in your life? What change would I actually make in my life? So there are a number of ways to do that, one being the serious one, and then the other one being the fun, just kind of hypothetical. Well, let's run with the numbers and talk about what that would actually look like, and then how does that change the conversation?
That's great. We can go back if you had anything else you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, well, it ties in beautifully to the previous question. So yeah, I mean, I can certainly speak to this one too. I so appreciate the heart behind this question because, it's about how can we move forward towards a peaceful conversation about something that's so polarizing. And being someone who's really interested in climate science, I'm personally not a climate scientist, but I do read a lot of the literature. You find that there's these two polar extremes. On one side, it seems that people are saying, it's not an issue at all. We're not going to talk about it. It's not even on the table for discussion. And on the other extreme, they're saying, well, we're basically already extinct. It's over. Like, this is it. So where does the data point? Where does the science point? And I think a big part of this comes back to not only being ambassadors for Christ, but also worshiping God with our minds. We remember that we should worship him with all of our heart and all of our soul, but often we forget how to worship him by thinking well. And I think it's such a gift that we're able to do that. And this is one of those situations when I think it's important to try and exercise that and to build into that. I read things all the time that are completely scientifically incorrect. The other day I read that because of climate change, koalas are functionally extinct. That is absolutely false. That is absolutely false. On the IUCN Red List, they're labeled as vulnerable, which is 4 steps above functionally extinct. Now, does that mean that there are no problems? No, of course there are problems. And as a conservation biologist, I am very interested in finding solutions to the problems. My issue is when we catastrophize something so strongly that it becomes the only thing that we see, and we forget some of the immediate things like habitat loss, pollution. These are things that we can address right now that everybody basically is agreeing on. And I understand the frustration when you're trying to have a talk with someone about climate change and maybe they say, I don't even want to talk about it. Yes, that can be frustrating, but there are plenty of other things that we can talk about that have to do with the good stewardship and protection and restoration of this earth. And if that's you and you've had those conversations and you feel frustrated, I would encourage you to just change gears and say, okay, fine, let's talk about pollution, or let's talk about reducing what we use. Let's talk about how we're managing our habitat. Yeah.
That's a great point, because you don't have to be up on the last data of the parts per million of carbon dioxide over Hawaii to say, you know what, a lot of plastic in the ocean isn't a good idea. And so bringing it back to that. Also, I was thinking, the first time we met, we had both just read the book Rambunctious Garden. Who's the author? Do you remember the author of that?
Emma Maris.
And basically the premise of that book is that there isn't a square foot of the Earth's surface that humans haven't touched and cultivated and harvested and stewarded and burned at some point, in history. And so the human capacity, do I think that humans can change the environment? Yeah, I think that was the mandate in creation, that God gave us the capacity to do that. The question is, do we change it for the better or for the worse? And so, again, it's a theological thing. I want to live and act in such a way that I'm being obedient to God. I don't want to live like, oh, here's a crisis, now I have to change my life. I want to be obedient to God and have the footprint part of that be a flow from that obedience, not in response to a crisis, but because out of an obedience to a command.
Mm.